Hi, I'm Angela Rideau, and I'm here to talk to you about the 3E model and to just explain how you can best use that and apply that to your own teaching and learning. So I'll start off by looking at the 3E framework, exploring examples, and knowing how to apply this to your own teaching. So what is the 3E framework? The three broad areas are enhance, extend, and empower. So the first is about adopting technology in the simplest form, where you're literally just putting a resource that you would normally have in a face-to-face environment in an online area. So that's basically to increase their activity. Extend, as described by the 3E model, is to just extend the use of technology and allow the learners to have some form of interactivity so that they can work together in a group or that they can interact with the resource. And the main purpose of this is collaboration. And the last is empower, which requires higher order thinking skills and enables the learners to empower them and develop their own learning materials for revision or to share with other peers. So that's where they're in control of their own learning and they're creating their own resources. Okay, so moving on. There's a quote that I think really sums up this session, which is "Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I may remember, but involve me and I learn." So I think that's quite nice. And with this in mind, I did a little bit of research and asked our learners what they think is good online learning and to give feedback on their online learning platform, which is Moodle. So we did a little bit of research and learners gave a bit of feedback about what their views were on Moodle, what they thought could be improved, about the layout, the communication. And based on this feedback, we then decided to look at what models we might need to put in place. So we developed a framework of quality standards, and I'm just about to explain those to you now. So the first question we asked was, how are teachers using online resources? So what's happening in the online course? And what we saw was I see, I do, I create, as you can see at the bottom of the screen. So some teachers were using Moodle as a repository, as a giant filing cabinet where they were sticking URLs, documents, schemes of work, handouts, and there was no interactivity for the learners. Other teachers were developing their use of Moodle slightly more, and they were getting learners to interact with the resources. So learners were able to upload assignments, participate in quizzes, discussions, forums, and potentially add images to an online learning zone and provide feedback as well. So they were doing something. And then lastly, the learners were collaborating. And this is where the richest form of learning was taking place. And this is what the aim is, where students were generating course content in terms of revision notes or learning materials or contributing to a shared wiki, which was learner generated and then checked by teachers. So this was the highest order of thinking skills, which is I create. The next question we asked was, what is the learning experience? So there was a whole sort of continuum in this blended learning experience for the learners. In some situations, the learners were active, then they were engaged, and then where we really wanted them to be was autonomous, where they could learn independently. So they had the right digital literacy skills to be able to take ownership of their learning and be confident. Now, the model that was already out there is the one that I've just outlined, which is the 3E TSEP approach developed by Napier University's Kevin Smyth. And that was back in 2007. So what I did was I adapted their model to create something that was called gold, silver, and bronze. And it was with this in mind: enhance, extend, and empower. Okay, so we developed the use of the 3E model in terms of looking at Moodle and applying it to the three questions that I was just looking at earlier. So in the case of bronze, where the learner is active, the teacher would be using Moodle as a repository, or it's being used in the most basic form possible. And an example of this might be a teacher creating an online glossary of terms, and the learners are able to view this only. In the silver example, the learner is engaged and student can add their own definitions to the online glossary, so they're interacting. In the gold example, the learner is autonomous, and this is the empower area, where students have permission to create their own glossary, so the teacher has actually actively shared that access with them to Google Classroom, to Moodle, whatever platform is being used, so that the learners could work collaboratively and independently of their teacher and generate content, learning content. So moving on from this, there were 5 key areas that came back in the student feedback that we investigated, which was the way a course looked. It had to be consistent. The information that was available to learners. So when you're designing your online course, bear that in mind. Bear in mind how you would check access and usage and how you would monitor that. The other thing that was important to learners was communication. So how they were communicated to and how much information was being communicated, how often, how the format of that looked, and whether they were able to communicate and participate as well in the discussions. And lastly, the quality of resources that were available. With all this in mind, I created an online model of quality online standards, which was gold, bronze, and silver for the use of Moodle, and it was mapped against the 3E model of enhance and extend and empower. Now, that was the quality online standards model that was developed by myself with the Napier University's 3E approach. Now, moving on to the next stage is how to apply the 3E framework for your own learning and teaching and assessment. The 3E framework model has a website behind it, which has lots of different examples, and there's a toolkit that's been developed. So please go online and check that out. One specific example is about lab and fieldwork. I'll just move that up here. In this model, it's been demonstrated in terms of enhance, extend, and empower. So just to give you a quick outline, when undertaking lab and field work, in the enhance stage, the teacher might have created an online self-assessment test for the learners. In the extend model, teachers are actively encouraging learners to use cameras and personal devices and videos and mobile phones to record lab and field work, and create interactive resources where you can drop a pin and then interact with a resource. And lastly, in the empower stage, there's a virtual field trip scenario where the learners can work in smaller groups and perhaps generate that themselves as a team. Okay, so here's 3 examples of how the 3E model has been applied. So in the first example here for enhance, we discussed online self-assessment tests for learners to have their learning experience enriched from the classroom to a digital environment, where you could create a Google form, share that in an online environment in Moodle, Google Classroom, or anything else. So that's the first way that this has been demonstrated. In the example of extend, what they've done here is suggest learners use mobile phones to record lab and field work, use pin drop features with geotagging, and a really great example of this is Thinglink, which is an interactive resource where you can upload 360 videos, 360 images where learners can interact with them just in the same way as you do with Google Maps, where you can walk through and turn the screen left and right and you get 360 images. And this is great for things like virtual museums. So in this example, Thinglink was used by 6 major museums who came together and made a collaborative resource for schools. And in that, they were able to look at videos, articles that were embedded in here. So learners were able to walk through this virtual museum, interact with artwork. So you could include formative assessment with Google Forms embedded in there. You could put a collage of pictures in there. You could embed videos in there. And there's a lot of other resources that you could add in there as well. So Thinglink is a really great example how learners can extend their learning through using an interactive and collaborative resource. Another really, really great experience for learners for interacting is to use VR headsets. And in this example, you can see here, learners have got headsets on, and on the top left-hand image, they've got headsets on. At the bottom left-hand image is what they are actually seeing through the headsets. And on the top right-hand image, you've got a merge cube, which allows you to create interactive content that's tagged, and you can feel that you're actually holding something in your hand. So at the bottom right-hand side, you've got a heart that's been tagged by the person who's created this content. So that's something that's quite a good example of interactive learning. In the example of empower, this is where autonomous learning happens, and this is the higher order thinking skills, which is student generated content, either individually or as group, where students are curators of content. And this could be used for revision purposes or to underpin their own learning. So this is an example that I'd like to show you, which has been developed by my colleague of mine called Adam Blackwood. And it's a field example where you'll see a tractor and Thinglink has been used, but there's no reason why a learner couldn't generate a piece of learning like this. So as you can see, the video is demonstrating that you can move around in a virtual environment. So you could see a 360 experience of the tractor. The teacher has tagged different learning zones to enable the learner to interact with this, but the student could also create content like this for other students or for their own learning, where you can look at different learning resources as well. So you could add question marks, you could add assessment in there. You can zoom in on different areas and tag images. You could add a video of something and demonstrate how that works. But again, this could also be used for feedback or for capturing assessments from the learners as well. So it could be learner generated. Hi, I really hope that you enjoyed the 3E model explained in my tutorial video and that you have a better idea of what 3E represents. And I hope you can apply that to your teaching and learning and find examples and opportunities to create collaborative learning environment for your learners and also collaborative and interactive learning experience for your students.